Feeling Loudly. I'm an astrologer, tarot reader, and Akashic Records reader. If this is your first time here, hi, welcome. I post a lot of pick a card readings and astrology content and would love for you to subscribe if you're not already. For those of you who have been here before, hello, welcome. Today we're doing a reading on Venus Retrograde, which begins on July 22nd, although we've been in the retro shade, the build up to the retrograde period, for over a month now. So we've been feeling the itch and kind of feeling the build up as we've approached Venus stationing retrograde, which happens in 2 days from the time of me recording this. And that retrograde will last until September 3rd, although we'll also have a retro shade after shadow period that lasts until October 7th. This reading today is going to be focused primarily on predictions and guidance for the actual retrograde period, although it may also apply to that shadow period. Just a heads up, I recorded an entire first group reading, pile one, partially last week and then again today, and it got completely messed up and I lost the first 20 to 30 minutes of that reading. So I'm re-recording the intro too to account for only having 2 piles because I just can't record that all over again. And something told me that I was getting stalled for a reason, and then I checked with my deck and they really didn't want me to publish group 1. So it's just 2 today. But these are juicy readings. I already recorded them and there's a lot that it contains that's focused on starting with the sort of anchor energy that you're in right now. Then we'll roll the astro dice and discover some of the themes that are coming up for you right now and throughout the retrograde. And then we'll get into the overarching energy for Venus retrograde, what might occur in the context of relationships, in finances, and then finally in the land of pleasure. And all of these are Venusian things. At the end of your reading, you'll get an archetype card that is a sort of north star, something you can hang on to and focus on throughout this retrograde in order to sort of navigate it to the best of your ability. So we only have 2 piles today, but they are big ones. For group 1, I'm just gonna show you what's going on here. So this is group 1. This is the Portals Tarot by Taylor Ursula of That's So Pisces, and your crystal is this pink jasper. Group 2, we have the Cosmic Slumber Tarot by Tillie Walden, and you have this black obsidian as your crystal. So group 2, group 1, select whichever one speaks to you, and then you can find your reading in the timestamp below. See you there. If you chose the Portals Tarot by Taylor Ursula of That's So Pisces and the pink jasper, then this is your group. You may notice I'm in a totally different location, wearing totally different clothes today. It's actually a week after I recorded the intro. I got kind of derailed during pile 1 and I trusted it and I took several days off. That feels a little bit less relevant to you than it did to pile 1 because that literally happened during their reading. I had to stop midway through and wait a week and then come back to it. So I'm praying to Saturn and Mars that they don't derail me in the same way, since we are experiencing a Mars-Saturn opposition today, and this is kind of like a finger cross situation to see if I can get through a recording. So a couple things before I get into your anchor card and the astro dice. One thing that came up really clearly for you is that cleansing and hydrating are really important right now and throughout Venus retrograde. It feels like, I was searching for water in our water filter basin. I have one of those Berkey filters that stands on the counter, and it was I was leaning it over to try to get the last of the water out. I also felt the urge before I sat down for your reading to put rose oil on my chest and to put oil on my face, this moisturizing oil that I use for my skin. So that could all be relevant to you. You could be focused on beauty This could be a really like beauty oriented Venus retrograde for you. You could be really focused on tuning into Venusian herbs and practices. Rose is a very Venusian flower. And so using rose scent, using rose ingredients could be important for you. And then again, just focusing on the skin and focusing on cleansing your energy and literally cleansing your body. All of that feels right. I like applied a little bit of lipstick, like it's very Venusian. And you chose the pink jasper, which is a really beautiful stone that has a sort of, I don't know if it's actually associated with Venus, but it has a sort of Venusian feeling to me. Okay, but let's get into your reading. We'll start with the anchor card. This is going to ground us in the present moment. So stuff that's been kind of up for you already, which will likely also be relevant throughout Venus retrograde. But this is going to help you identify that this is the right pile for you. And then I'll toss the astro dice, and that will give us more context about the sort of like themes and focuses that might be coming up for you right now and throughout retrograde period. So starting with your anchor card, we have Death in reverse. I love this card, and this whole deck is incredible. The imagery is amazing. I highly recommend getting it if you're interested in adding to your collection. We see with this card in particular, it looks like there's an explosion happening, and there are these like particles of rock that are flying outward, it looks like. And we see this set of steps that looks like it can lead you down into that explosion if you were to follow that, or away from it. You kind of get to make the choice. So you're going to go into it or you're going to go away from it. And then at the top, there's this portal of sorts, which is the theme of the entire deck. When we see this in the reverse, I get the sense that we are returning to that explosion, that we're kind of returning to the site of some type of prior pain or ending. Death is usually associated with some type of ending or transformation. And when we see death in the reverse, it often means we're like going back and like exploring. Like I almost get the sense that you're returning to like a crime scene, not literally, but like going back, sort of like examining the evidence, seeing what went wrong, seeing what happened, so that you can make sense of something that occurred in the past. And so I'll get more information to see what this is about, but this feels like something that's in your consciousness already, where you're wanting to go back to something, whether that's a relationship, very Venusian, or just some type of past hurt. And it feels like you're getting kind of tugged back in energetically, and it's like knocking at the door and calling for you to explore. You're hesitant, but there's also a part of you that really wants to go in, that really wants to open that door and really wants to investigate. And I keep saying investigate because death is associated with Scorpio, associated with Pluto. And it can be this magnetic, almost compulsive at times draw that something has on us, where it's very subconscious. And so we might not be totally aware of what's happening, but we just feel ourselves getting tugged and we can't quite put our finger on why. So if that's resonating, this is your pile, but let's get more information on kind of the context where this is coming up. So we have the sun in the first house and the sign of Virgo. Interesting. Okay. So with the sun in the first, let's start there. It could be that this is connected to your identity or an experience that was really transformative when it comes to the way that you identify. And so when I say identify, I mean, that could mean like your personal identities, like your gender, like your sexuality, like your orientation to the world, like the pronouns you use. This could be very focused on your identity, your racial identity, your cultural identity, where you come from, where you locate yourself in the world and in society. I'm hearing for some people, like you may have changed your name. You may have found your name, and that could be super relevant. Maybe you've transitioned, and maybe death in reverse is you kind of like looking back at that experience or looking back at the old life that you lived and trying to kind of heal or repair some of the stuff that may have preceded this new life for you. We also have Virgo. And so The sign of Virgo could be relevant to you. The archetype of Virgo is connected to healing a lot of the time. And so sometimes healing involves us returning to the site or returning to the wound in order to kind of sometimes maybe cleanse. That came up, Virgo, cleanse. I was like wiping water off the sink and like wanting to do all these very sort of Virgoan things. So you might have strong Virgo, you might just be feeling very sort of Virgo energy right now. We do have Mars in Virgo at the moment, and it's loud because Mars is opposite Saturn in Pisces, like I said at the beginning. So you might just be noticing yourself kind of like going into maybe slightly controlling or perfectionistic tendencies and wanting to like edit everything around you in order to maintain a sense of control. And that can also show up in Plutonian ways and in Scorpionic ways, which both Pluto and Scorpio are connected to power and connected to control. And so both Scorpio and Virgo could be really significant in your chart. You could be a person who has had to grapple with your relationship to power and control. And that could be some of the experiences that you're reflecting back on now, kind of considering where were these born from? What am I trying to suppress or heal within myself by doing these things? What part of myself am I trying to keep safe by keeping everything else in control or by keeping myself in control? And so again, like I come back to the body a lot because I feel like for a lot of you, this is associated with physical stuff. This could be like being quite critical of your body. This could be having a distorted body image, like having some level of dysmorphia, or different manifestations of that at varying degrees of difficulty. So if that resonates too, this is definitely your pile today. But to provide some sort of alternate ways this might manifest, the other thing roots me in more of like the needing to heal everyone around me so that I can feel safe. That can be a Virgo tendency too. And because I'm looking at the first house and the sun, I'm just feeling like there is this focus on self, but that it may manifest outwardly. And so you might be the type of person where if you're feeling uneasy or anxious, you might try to sort of like monitor other people or monitor your environment in order to feel safer within yourself. So I'm going to stop there and we'll get into the cards and kind of look at what's to come for Venus retrograde. If none of that resonates for you at all, then I would consider going back to the beginning and choosing a different pile. Let's get into it for those of you who are hanging out. We're going to be starting with anchor card. An anchor card? No, I just did the anchor card. We're going to leave the overall energy for Venus retrograde, and I already had a card fly out. So we're going to start with the overall energy for this entire period. And again, we're looking mostly at July 22nd to September 3rd. But what I speak to could be relevant, probably will be relevant for the shadow period, which is lasting from September 3rd through October 7th. So just keep that in mind. That's the general timeline. But the bulk of this will be focused on the 22nd through September 3rd. Okay, so they want me to start with the card that flew out and not shuffle more right now, so let's start here. We have the Queen of Swords as the overall energy for you for Venus retrograde. So the Queen of Swords, swords are connected to air, and the queens are often considered to be associated with the cardinal signs. And so cardinal air is Libra. So Libra is also a sign that's ruled by Venus. And so Libra people in particular often have a lot of stuff come up during Venus retrogrades. Both Libra and Taurus are the two Venus ruled signs. So if you have significant Libra in your chart, or Taurus for sure, just more of a confirmation that this is your reading. Also, it could manifest, or you could just have other air in your chart. Gemini or Aquarius are the two other air signs. The Queen of Swords is a very discerning figure. It's someone who really prioritizes the mind, has strong boundaries, and that was another word that came up before I sat down to read for you, boundaries. I actually took the other decks for the other readings and put them in the other room because I wanted the energy to be really clear. And so that might be something that you kind of relate to, like really needing clear energy, clear boundaries, needing to get clear on what's yours and what's not yours, and have that sort of like swords, like vibe. That stuff is likely to come up a lot this Venus retrograde. Your boundaries are likely to be tested. You're likely to be put in situations where you have to really distinguish between self and other and sort of claim your space and claim what you need and define, like, this is mine, that's your, like I see like drawing a line in the sand. So that could be literally in your space, like in your physical space, or that could be like more subtle, more sort of energetically with other people. For a lot of you, you may be quite sensitive, but that may show up as you having to have more of a cold or closed off exterior in order to feel protected and feel sort of like energetically secure. So you may be the sort of like more quiet, introverted type who appears kind of like stony or cold, but who's actually like quite sensitive internally. And I relate a lot to this. This is probably my pile. But that might be something that comes up for evaluation throughout this Venus retrograde. Like maybe you notice that you're actually blocking relationships out, or maybe you notice that that is manifesting more as this defensive sort of reaction to other people's energy, like wanting to push stuff away instead of creating a sort of stronger core or center so that you can feel more grounded and feel more together even when people around you are doing all of the like wild shit that they do. So that is your overall energy. The Queen of Swords, it's going to come up. You're going to maybe look at this sort of archetype. Maybe the archetype of the Ice Queen is going to be relevant for you throughout Venus retrograde. Maybe examining how that both serves you and also at times sort of hinders you or keeps you away from possibly connections that you actually would really like to connect with, people that you would really like to connect with. Okay. Before I move on and pull another card for overall energy and get into the other stuff, I just want to speak for a moment on the imagery of this card in particular, because this Queen of Swords is depicted in a very different way than the Queen of Swords usually is. I said all this stuff about the Queen of Swords being quite cold or appearing quite cold, but being quite sensitive internally. And I think that that's really echoed by the tears that we see, these sort of inky tears and the butterfly overhead. Okay, we made it 14 minutes and 30 seconds without interruption. I think that's pretty good for Mars opposite Saturn. But let's get back to it. So I was saying the inky tears and the butterfly overhead kind of bring us into the emotionality of the Queen of Swords, which is something we don't often hear about or talk about, because although the Queen of Swords can be quite icy and serious, or at least appear that way, there's also this deep knowing that being this sort of carrier of truth is painful. It always reminds me of sort of like the concept of, what is it called? Cassandras. So if you look back at like Cassandra in the story of Troy, she was the one who was trying to warn the Romans that this attack was going to happen with the horse and all that shit. I don't really know all the details, but basically Cassandra was like this holder of truth who could see the future, but her curse was that no one would believe what she saw. And so sometimes there is that element with the Queen of Swords for me. Like she's so discerning and she's so wise that sometimes she sees what other people don't see and what other people don't want to see in particular. And that can be really painful to be that kind of person, because you see things and you express things and you often see into people's shadows and see stuff that they don't want to see, or you see the underbelly of situations or the elephant in the room. And naming that often leads to pain for yourself. Being a carrier of truth can be really painful, often like what you think about whistleblowers experiencing. So there's this pain that comes with the Queen of Swords, and I think it's important for us to speak to that because that feels relevant to your Venus retrograde experience. And it's interesting that the screen just got blurry right as I said that, because it feels as though you might have your vision sort of obscured during this Venus retrograde, and some of the clarity and focus and discernment that might be really natural to you might get a little bit fuzzy. You might be challenged to perhaps rely on different means for kind of finding your way through the world. Maybe you have been a little bit removed from your emotions, and this Venus retrograde could cloud your judgment a little bit, potentially putting you into situations that cause you to connect with your emotional self a little bit more than maybe you do in your day-to-day life. And I want to emphasize, I'm not getting the sense that you're someone who's like closed off per se. It's just more so that you have strong guards up, and I'm sure for very good reasons. So let's do one more card. Let me try to get this back in focus. That didn't work at all. Sometimes this works. All right, well, we'll see what happens. This happened in the last reading too, and this does not usually happen with this camera, so interesting. We're having foggy, sort of hard to decipher experiences. There we go. All right, it's clear now. So again, that sort of ability, clarity was, I think I mentioned earlier, was a keyword that came up for you before sitting down to read, just as I was preparing. So a desire for clarity, a desire for a sense of boundaries and protection, cleanliness, all of these things might be kind of keywords for you throughout this Venus retrograde. Let's get one more card for the general energy, and then I'm going to dig into relationships, finances, and pleasure. So your other card for overall energy is the Two of Swords. For a lot of you, you're contemplating a big decision. And part of what I mentioned about needing to come into your emotional self, or even the word I wanted to use was your intuition, part of that decision-making process for you is, can I get out of my head and into my heart? Can I get out of my head and into my intuition? Can I connect with my truth in a different way maybe than I'm used to connecting with it? Because if you're really airy, if you are, I don't know, I feel like y'all have water in you too, but the signs of Libra and, it could be Aquarius and Gemini could be relevant for you too. We also mentioned Virgo, which is about as airy an earth sign as it gets. Virgo is mercurial. And so there's a lot of Mercury energy that's up here. And the Two of Swords is a card associated with swords, air, mental energy, but it's a card that asks us to sort of root down into our felt truth in order to move through the door, in order to choose the sword that we're going to carry with us into the next chapter. And so I'm feeling for you, like, by the way, when I did that harsh break and then I popped on again and was like, we're back, I took like 15 minutes and took my dog for a walk. And as I was walking, I was thinking about how with my natal Mars in Pisces, I lived the vast majority of my life disconnected from my Mars, not understanding how to take action in my life because I hadn't yet reconnected to my intuition. I hadn't yet reconnected to my knowing, which was so powerful as a child, but something that I suppressed and was taught to suppress and was taught to sort of close down and not say the things that I knew. And so as I was walking, was thinking about how part of me coming into my Mars has been deepening my intuition and trusting my intuition and learning that the best way I can take action is by first checking in with my intuition. It operates pretty much everything in my life. And that's just deeply true for me because of my chart. And so for you might be rooting into the way that you take action. What motivates you? What process do you have to go through in order to identify what the right choice is for you? Because I feel like for some of you, again, this might be about making a significant choice or like chewing on your options throughout this Venus retrograde and preparing to make a choice after the retrograde, which is always advisable, by the way, to not make big life choices until after the retrograde period is over, because this is a time of information gathering mostly. But it could be a time for you also when you're contemplating how you make choices in general and kind of what truth feels like to you, how you locate truth in your body, in your spirit. Maybe it is just in your mind. It really depends on your chart. It depends on your conditioning, who you are as a human, your cultural background, the way you grew up. All of these things influence how we make choices. And for you, that might be a big focus, is like understanding how you operate, how you work. I'm going to reshuffle these cards back in, and then we will move into your relationships throughout Venus retrograde. I'm going to go ahead and pause and shuffle, and then I'll pop back on with your cards. Okay, I have your relationship cards ready. Let's get into it. So interestingly, I only have one card turned over that I've looked at so far because it flew out sideways, and I decided to keep it sideways. The Emperor. So this was in this position, facing toward the other cards. I want to turn over the others before I get into the Emperor. Next, we have the Three of Wands. And finally, the Eight of Wands. Wow, a lot of fire. Okay, cool. So these are all fire. Wands are connected to fire, and the Emperor is connected to the sign of Aries. Aries could be significant in your chart. Or I'm thinking specifically of Chiron, which is currently in Aries. So it could be that there's a wound connected to identity. We talked about identity earlier with the first house and the sun coming up for your astro dice at the beginning. It could be that there's a wound connected to identity, to sense of self, to the way that you're able to express yourself in this world and to take up space. I'm feeling a sort of like maybe sensitivity to judgment or a sensitivity to like being perceived, especially in ways that do not resonate with the way that you perceive yourself. That might be an injury for you and something that's coming up in your relationships throughout Venus retrograde. When we see the Emperor, we think about a sort of like some degree of mastery over personal power. And so Aries is connected, it's first sign in the zodiac, and it's really that oomph that gets you out into the world. And it's like the scream of the baby at the beginning of life that's like, I'm here. And so there's this real emphasis on taking up space. And so for you, it feels like taking up space in relationships is going to be an important theme throughout Venus retrograde. Also seeing the Three of Wands and the Eight of Wands coming out beside each other, it feels like there's some sense of expansion and excitement that's coming into your relationships. You might be feeling a little bit more impulsive in relationships. You might have the desire to like hit the gas really quickly and start charging forward and either take an existing relationship up a notch or initiate new relationships, singular, plural, whatever. I want to emphasize that like, when I say relationships, that could be any type of relationship or human relationship or even a relationship with non-human beings too. But it is feeling like this is centered more around like community, friendship, and romance. And so with the Three of Wands, like it could be that you meet new people and you get really excited about them and you want to like go for it. Like you're like, oh, let's hang out. Like these are my people. I found them. Or like maybe you're dating and you get really excited about someone really quickly and then sort of like put all your eggs in that basket or double down, and maybe you're not paying attention and finding yourself and tuning into how you really feel. And so I'm brought back to the Two of Swords, where there's this element of making a choice and understanding how you make choices. And so your relationships might be challenging your typical Queen of Swords discernment. You may be not noticing some things. They may be sort of flying under your radar. We had the foggy, like blurry screen come up earlier. So I'm getting the sense to kind of just like advise you to be wary, keep an eye out for red flags, especially if you're connecting with new people. And I don't say that to scare you, because honestly, this does not feel like scary to me. It feels mostly like there are just relationships where they're mirroring back to you some things that maybe your judgment is a little fuzzy on. And these are kind of opportunities to like practice discernment, especially in relationships. That said, these are all quite like positive cards on their surface. And so I'm describing some of the more shadow characteristics of them because Venus retrograde can often bring up our shadow. And so while all of that stuff may be happening, while you may be feeling excited and moving forward and wanting to expand and maybe needing to slow down a little bit, there's also this sense of true and pure excitement. And so I feel this desire to tell you to enjoy yourself, and to maybe the antidote to like going too fast is just allowing yourself to focus on pleasure, is allowing yourself to focus on the enjoyment that relationships bring to your life without holding on to what they will be or what they will become, what shape they'll take in the future. Just allow yourself as much as possible to be present, to just enjoy what's here now, because we can't guarantee that the relationships that appear to us during Venus retrograde are going to stick around. It's sometimes, sure, but often they're coming in as a sort of like temporary experience that's meant to help us learn something about ourselves. And that sort of self-insight, I do feel like you're going to get a lot of it this Venus retrograde. I feel like there's a spark of creativity that's born from the connections that you make or the connections that you invest in this Venus retrograde. So like by invest, I mean like the people you spend time with, the people you hang out with, the people you talk to. It feels like there's going to be a lot of creative energy that's getting sort of pulled out like threads from those connections that's going to help serve you personally. And again, since our focus was the first house and the sun, I want to emphasize this is you time. This Venus retrograde is for you. It is not about anyone else. It's about reaffirming your identity. It's about feeling autonomous. It's about feeling powerful. And part of feeling powerful is recognizing how you give your power away. And so in these relationships, come back to self, constantly come back to self. That's not in the way where we have to close ourselves off and like be afraid of the world or be afraid of connecting with people, but more so like when you're in relationship, identifying ways that you can feel autonomous and sovereign in that relationship. How does sovereignty play a role in this Venus retrograde for you? What does it mean to be sovereign in this relationship and in that relationship? And how does that actually allow you to show up more fully and in deeper connection with people when you can stand as a sovereign being? So let us now move into finances. I did this for pile 1 too. I'm not going to pause for shuffle. It just felt necessary to pause the first time around, but let's get some cards for finances for group 1, please. Throughout Venus retrograde. I'm feeling a little bit of anxiety. That makes sense. Okay. So we have the 8 of Swords in reverse, the Hermit in reverse, and the 5 of Wands upright. So starting with the 8 of Swords in reverse, you may be coming out of a period of feeling really constricted financially, of feeling maybe a little bit trapped in a situation that was not right for you, or even kind of haunted by self-limiting beliefs that were keeping you trapped. Like maybe this was more of a false sense of scarcity or sort of like generational fears and even trauma coming up surrounding money and security. And so heading into retrograde, it feels like this stuff is up for examination. You're kind of questioning, coming back to the boundary thing, what is mine and what is not mine? Can I identify when I'm maybe regurgitating the beliefs and internalizing the narratives that I've heard from other generations in my lineage or just from society? And can I root in what's actually true for me? Not for someone else, but what is actually true for me? So I'm honestly seeing some people even like making a list of like all the beliefs that they have about money, and then going through the list and like crossing out anything that's simply inherited, and then circling anything that actually comes from your own lived experience. So something like that, maybe it's not exactly that, but there's some type of like exercise that you might want to go through that could help you to discern between things that you just picked up and kind of like put in your knapsack along the way. And part of that exercise with the Hermit in reverse is identifying the ways that you've isolated yourself from support. Maybe you have turned down financial support in the past when you really needed it because you wanted to cultivate maybe like some hyper independence. Maybe for some of you, money challenges have been associated with periods where you really closed in on yourself and kind of shut down. And maybe asking for help is an important thing that a task or a skill that you need to develop. I'm having a hard time talking right now. Maybe it's something that you need to develop throughout this Venus retrograde, is the ability to ask for help when you need it, if it's available to you. Also, I'm getting that there could be some type of like reassessment when it comes to, it's like your relationship to money, but it's more of like the metaphysical like idea of of money and energy. Like, I don't personally love when people talk about like money being energy. But of course we carry a lot of energy related to money. And when we pay for something or receive money, there is an exchange that happens there. And so for you, maybe I'm getting the sense for some of you that you're like service providers or practitioners or entrepreneurs of some kind. And it could be that you maybe shut down a little bit when it comes to receiving. And part of your exploration this Venus retrograde could be just that, like identifying the ways that you maybe are in resistance to receiving, and that's a blockage that you can really do some work on clearing throughout this Venus retrograde. Oh my God, I was just reminded of something as I looked down at the next card. By the way, before I proceed, this card is connected to Virgo, and Virgo is significant at the beginning, so it might be significant for you. The next card that just initiated that aha moment is the Five of Wands. When I look at this card, this is not necessarily the most positive card, but I'm not getting a super charged feeling from it. I'm getting a literal like message from this card, which is about fire ritual. For you, fire ritual throughout Venus retrograde could be really powerful. Burning away these old beliefs. What I was triggered to remember is that right before I sat down for your reading, I wanted to complete a little ritual that I was doing around the new moon that I just like couldn't finish. I got interrupted and I like didn't do it in a fire safe way, which is really unusual for me. And I like had to like like hit the fire out with a notebook. Like it was reckless. So don't do that. But if you connect with fire, which I feel like you all do, I'm getting that sense. We just had a very fiery last few cards for relationships. It could be important for you to bring fire into the equation and access its healing properties by allowing it to burn away the stuff that's ready to go. And to actually say that, like I'm talking sit down, when you cross those little things off your list, maybe write them on separate pieces of paper and then in a fire safe bowl, take them outside and like burn those little pieces of paper in your fire safe bowl. This looks like what I'm talking about. We have these 5 wands around this circle of fire in the center. And so it feels like they're feeding the fire, they're feeding the flames. And so what can you burn off? And it might be valuable to do this. What is our next moon? So we just had our full moon in Capricorn. We're going to have our full moon in Aquarius on, I think it's August 1st or 2nd. So that might be a valuable time for you to do this, for you to do some type of like burning ritual to help you cleanse some of these beliefs that you have around money and maybe the blockages that you have around receiving. All right. And finally, let's get some insight and advice on pleasure. So when I say pleasure, I don't just mean sexual pleasure. A lot of people assume that, but pleasure is connected to our senses. So it can be any type of sensual experience or anything that brings us a sense of like, ah. And so it's what makes you feel good. And what makes us feel good is very different for different people. It's very unique and personal. And so I'm saying this because I already get the sense for some of you that, again, there's a lot of narrative work that's happening here around what you're allowed to define as pleasure. Maybe your sense of pleasure looks very different than what people like talk about. The Five of Cups is at the bottom of the deck. So it feels like it wants me to start there. They want me to start there. The Five of Cups, we see this watery hole. It almost looks like a birth canal to me. And it feels like there's something that is birthing within you regarding pleasure. Maybe it's connected to the literal vagine, if that's relevant for you. If you are an owner or someone who interacts with that, I hope I can say that word on YouTube. It would be ridiculous if I couldn't, but I wouldn't be surprised because of the patriarchy. But it feels like that is important for you, connecting to your sexuality and connecting to maybe some of the beliefs around sexuality or the blockages around sexuality that maybe came with you when you were birthed. Maybe they're related to the person who birthed you or to your early childhood, and maybe there's a feeling of needing to break free from some stuff. That came up again at the beginning of your reading, so that could be important for you. Thinking through, especially if your sexual preferences have evolved throughout your life, as they do for most of us, especially if your gender identity has evolved throughout your life, as it does for a lot of us. All of those things are going to be important for you to sift through and to understand how those shifting identities have impacted your relationship to pleasure. Maybe what you found pleasurable 5 years ago is completely different now. Maybe you don't like that at all. If that's true, how can you come into a deeper sense of embracing that and allowing that to be? Okay, onto your cards. We have the Two of Swords now in reverse. Really interesting. So this is bringing me back to, how do I deny my intuition? How do I deny the truth that I know to be true? And that could be related to the stuff I just mentioned when it comes to pleasure. How do I deny my truth? How do I suppress what I really want? For many of you, your desires, this is true for most of us, that our desires are a compass that points us towards some type of truth about ourselves. And when we follow that, it can evoke like big changes and transformations because we're honoring ourselves. We're stepping into authenticity. When we deny that, maybe we move farther away from our truth. Second up, we have the Seven of Cups in reverse. So when it comes to pleasure, you could be getting lost or not allowing yourself to fantasize and to kind of like follow through on the thoughts and the impulses that you have and just see them out. Not necessarily acting on them, but more like you may be pushing down the fantasies and the dreams that come up for you. So it could be like, to give you a concrete example, maybe like, let's keep it super PG for now. Maybe you start dreaming about this like delicious sandwich that you had, and it's like thick and it has like all of these layers and like a really good sauce and all fresh ingredients, and you just find yourself like longing for a sandwich like that, and you can see it and you can taste it. But then as soon as you start thinking about that, there's this voice that comes in that's like, you can't eat that. You can't eat that. Look at like maybe you're calorie counting, or maybe like there are ingredients that, I don't know, you're not comfortable with or something. And this voice comes in that shuts it down, and you immediately kind of forget that you ever even had that desire. And so you could apply that to many different types of desires, but there's this need for you to actually indulge because there's something in that fantasy that is pointing you toward your destination. And you might notice this coming through your dreams too. Like you might have dreams that wake up something within you, that wake up some type of truth within you. And then in the morning you wake up and for like a split second, you allow it to be. And then suddenly this voice of judgment comes in that's like, how could you do that? And it happens so quickly that like you might just forget that it ever happened at all. So this time during Venus retrograde, these desires might be calling to you, and it's time for you to give them permission. It's time for you to give yourself permission to fantasize and dream about what you want without fearing what that means, without judging yourself for those desires and for those dreams. Because they're telling you something, and it's not always like, oh, that's the thing for me. Sometimes it's just illuminating something within us, some truth within us. And it's not about a specific person or a specific food or whatever. It's like getting to the underlying need and desire that's living within us that we need to be aware of. And finally, we have the Four of Cups in reverse. So I feel you throughout this Venus retrograde letting go of a sense of apathy. Letting go of maybe a type of shutdown that's happened for you. I'm hearing like it feels quite physical. It feels like there could be like, if this is relevant for some of you, like a dry spell could be ending during Venus retrograde, or you might be feeling like more alive in certain ways. I think most of you probably know what I'm talking about, making these like subtle little innuendos. But this is a water card. This is a wet card. And when it's in reverse, we're often like kind of removing the veil that's kept us from seeing something that was in front of us. And we might be coming out of a sort of like lethargy, a sort of resignation, a sort of period of shutdown and maybe isolation and maybe like melancholy. And so it's almost like I get this image of you like blinking your eyes open after a sleepy period and sort of coming awake to something. And so for most of you, I feel like that is coming awake to your pleasure and to your desire again throughout this Venus retrograde. All right, finally, we're going to do an archetype card for you, and this is going to be just a sort of like North Star for you throughout this retrograde period. So something to kind of point you or ground you or help you to make choices, since that's a big theme for you. Beautiful. Okay, so your archetype is the Temple. So the Temple is a card that is connected to sacredness and to a sense of holiness, a sense of reverence. When we go to the temple, literally, we're there to worship. When we go to the temple metaphorically, we might be going to our bodies. We might be considering the body and the way that the body can act as a temple. At the beginning of the reading, I talked about beauty a lot and wanting to kind of adorn myself, like putting on lipstick and rose oil. So part of your process of coming back to yourself could be treating your body with that type of reverence. It could be getting dressed up more. It could be like adorning yourself more. It could be embodying Venus's energy by caring for your physical vessel in that way. For others of you, or maybe both are true for some of you, this could literally mean engaging in some type of spiritual practice that helps you to center yourself throughout the ups and downs of retrograde periods. So this could like be like going to your altar every day, or creating an altar if you don't have one, and making it a beautiful one. Like bringing in rose petals, bringing in oils, bringing in soft candles, bringing in scents, bringing in lavender, bringing in these very like sensual Venusian things to help aid you in accessing that magic, and spending time at that altar at least every Friday on Venus Day, but ideally more often, maybe coming back to it daily and saying a prayer, asking for support from Venus and making offerings to Venus by beautifying this altar and coming back to it and changing the water and keeping it fresh and all of this. I'm also hearing that buying yourself flowers could be a really nice devotional act for yourself throughout Venus retrograde. I'm going to go ahead and read the description from the guidebook for you, because it often contains messages that are more expansive and specific than what I channel. So I will also hold it up for you at the end. So if you'd like, you can take a photo, a screenshot. So the sanctuary, the shrine, the altar. When we think of the temple, we often envision an architectural structure in a far-off land. We're quick to distance ourselves from the sacred, assuming we must expend much effort in order to arrive there. Yet the temple is a universal and omnipresent energy, accessible in the highest and lowest, richest and poorest of places. Visiting the temple might be as simple as stepping into the dappled light of the forest, slowly and sensuously kissing a lover, or closing your eyes to travel inward. This card is a call to re-examine what you pay homage to and what you reject. What do you spend your time worshiping? Your phone, money, material goods? What barriers do you draw between yourself and the sacred? Perhaps there's room on your altar for something new, something surprising. Offer it to the heavens. The ancient yogis saw the body itself as the temple, every function and feature of it as an expression of divinity. Build a shrine with found materials. Don't spend any money, only time. I love that challenge. Though indeed the temple travels with you, this card is interwoven with the pilgrim archetype. If you've been longing for a spiritual journey, book your tickets. Ooh, maybe some of you need to travel. Maybe it's like a retreat of sorts. Maybe it's just time, like I'm seeing on the coast for some of you, maybe time by the water, something that helps you return to yourself. When light, the temple represents reverence for all and life as sanctuary. When dark, it represents idolatry, cults, and strict spirituality. To go deeper, you can, I think, listen to, I don't know what this is, Now is the Time by Hafez, Hafez. So I'm going to hold this up to the screen and try to get it to focus. It looks like that's the best I can do. So if you want to go ahead and take a screenshot, you can do that now. All right. If you got something from this reading, please do like and comment and share it. It really, really helps me. I'm still a pretty new YouTube creator and I'm trying to grow the channel. So any support means a lot. And if you're not already subscribed, please do subscribe. If you'd like a personal reading, I offer tarot, Akashic Records, and astrology readings, and you can find the link below in the description box. I will be back soon with more videos, and in the meantime, I'm wishing you a beautiful, hopefully healing Venus retrograde. Bye. If you chose the Cosmic Slumber Tarot and the Black Tourmaline, then this is your reading. So as a refresher, or if you skip the intro, I'm going to start with an anchor card, the one that you chose at the beginning, and that will help us root into your current energy and will kind of be the determinant in addition to the astro dice to see if this is the right pile for you, but also to help you kind of just identify with what's up for you right now. From there, we'll get into the sort of general themes for your Venus retrograde from July 22nd to September 3rd. And then we will explore relationships, finances, and pleasure. Before I get into the card, I want to call out, I've told every pile, I'm obviously in a different location than I was in the introduction. I had to take a long break, and that was more relevant to pile one, so I won't really explain the details. But what I do want to tell you is that just before your reading, I was talking to a friend who's going through a breakup, and the other thing that happened is that I was searching for the deck, Cosmic Slumber, that I'm about to use for your reading, because I had your anchor card out and like tucked away for the past week while I was on break. And then I couldn't find the deck, and I realized it was right in front of me. And so those two things might be relevant for you. Maybe a recent breakup, maybe an impending breakup, not to scare you. It doesn't, if that's not at all on your radar, it's probably not a message for you. But breakups could be a theme for you, or not seeing something that's right in front of you. So kind of a lack of clarity or a lack of clarity. Okay, let's get into it. So starting with your anchor card, we have the Ace of Torches or the Ace of Wands. So I'm feeling for you that you've actually had quite a bit of energy lately, and kind of energy you're not quite sure what to do with it. Like it might be a sort of restless energy. You might be feeling like there's a lot of creative vibes kind of flowing in your space, and like you have a lot of ideas coming to you, maybe a lot of impulses, maybe you're feeling restless and a little bit antsy. But either way, it feels exciting, but also in a sort of frustrating way. And so as I'm recording this, we're going through Mars opposite Saturn, which is a frustrating transit. And if you're watching this around the week of July 20th to 23rd, then you might just be in that energy. It might be hitting you especially hard. Fire signs might be significant in your chart. And I'm getting the sense that you're feeling impatient, like maybe impatient with some type of change that you're hoping to implement in your life, maybe impatience with just the circumstances of your life, or just wanting something to speed up. Let's roll the astro dice to get a little bit more information. So we have Sagittarius, the North Node, and the 12th house. Interesting. Okay, so let's start with Sag and the North Node. It feels like what you're impatient about or what you're yearning toward is really a sense that you are kind of on your spiritual path. It may be that you're feeling impatient with your vision, with something coming to fruition that you're excited about, that feels really important to you, that feels really soul-centered to you. This could be related to work. This could be related to your community. This could be related to family and home. Maybe there's some vision that you have for your life that you're really wanting to push across the line and you just can't seem to get there. And with the 12th house, that often relates to our subconscious. It relates to the dream world. It relates to the things that kind of are behind the scenes that we can't quite put our fingers on. So a lot of this stuff might be kind of brewing beneath the surface. It may be something that you've kept hidden, that you've kept secret from other people, and something that is really tied in with your sort of soul path, whatever that is. And with the North Node, that's emphasized, that there's a sort of like call or a hunger that we're feeling towards something. And when we're talking about the North Node, which has just moved into Aries, adding to that spark of fire, we're feeling compelled towards something that probably lights us up in a sort of like, I want to say self-centered, and that doesn't necessarily mean in a negative connotation, but more so like it's focused on the self. It's something that has to do with our path, ours alone, our journey, etc. And so that's what feels most up for you, and that's probably going to continue into Venus retrograde in some way, but we're going to explore exactly how that might manifest. And I want to give a heads up. These readings have been a little bit less focused on like the concrete predictions, but more so the themes that are coming up for you and the potential sort of challenges that might arise and some advice on navigating through those. It could be that your reading goes in a different direction if that's what's called for. But either way, I always advise people to not hold or grasp too tightly onto predictions because you do have free will. The tarot shows you the sort of trajectory that you're currently on based on the choices you're making now and where you're at now, but you always have the power to steer your own direction. So if a prediction is feeling disempowering, if it's feeling like something that you don't want, then think about what you can do to change that. All right, let's get into it. If none of that resonated from the first portion, then this is probably not your reading. But let's go check out our overall energy for Venus retrograde. So I'm going to do 3 cards. So first up, we have the Wheel of Fortune, Temperance, and the Tower in reverse. Wow, 3 major arcana. All right. For some of you, you may have an Aries North Node. You may have a significant Aries placement in your chart. For some of you, you may have significant fixed signs in your chart. Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. We already saw Sag come out in your astro dice, so Sagittarius might be significant, or Mars itself might be kind of like a significant planet in your chart, as in it might be aspecting a lot of planets. It might be your chart ruler. You might just be going through a Martian transit, Or again, the sign of Aries could be really significant for you, or Scorpio. We'll see. So let's get into the Wheel of Fortune. So first off, this is going to be a fateful period of time for you. There are certain events, certain people, certain experiences that you are meant to have during this period. When we see this many major arcana, it often means that the universe is really at work, and that it's less so about the individual people or like day-to-day circumstances, but more so the overarching sort of like soul path experiences that are coming up. So I do want to say for you, this could be a tremendously important time. This could be a period of time that is life-defining in some ways, and maybe not externally. It might not look like huge shakeups necessarily. For some of you, that could be true for you for this next stretch of time. Venus retrograde does tend to deliver for a lot of people. But there is this sense of balance that's coming in with temperance. And so while a lot of the events that are unfolding in your life do feel pretty fated and they feel quite significant, there's also a sort of restoration of balance that's coming through with the Sag energy here. And I want to sort of sidebar on that and say that Sag is not a sign that we typically associate with balance exactly. But the way that I see temperance is that there's a sort of unification of very different energies that come together in Sagittarius, to the point that you see the sort of blending and the ability to hold two truths, or to sort of practice both and so it's not the sort of like Libra balance that we see, where Libra is seeking harmony per se, but more so like we're able to hold two truths, we're able to hold two things at once and sort of operate in these sort of like polar ways and hold a lot of like multiplicity, if that's even the right word, within ourselves, and make space for the many different shades that we may take on. And so it's sort of this Gemini Sag axis thing where it makes space for the sort of like nuance. On the other hand, Sag can be a sign that gets pretty dogmatic. So Sag people sometimes, and just the energy of Sag, can be quite gung-ho about what they believe in and have difficulty seeing other perspectives. And that can also definitely be true of the fixed signs of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And so I'm getting the sense that for you, there's a huge perspective shift that might be happening during this Venus retrograde, where it's opening you up to more possibilities, where it's broadening your perspective and helping you to see things with more nuance and in less black and white terms. The other major energy that's coming through is the Tower in reverse, which can often mean that we're sort of averting a disaster, but we're sort of like, what's the term? When we're sort of like avoiding the inevitable. And that can mean holding on to a relationship that feels like it's sort of doomed to fail. That can be holding on to a job that's sort of like collapsing around us, or any situation where we are feeling some degree of fear. And I just looked down, I have this little sort of antique thing that says Je t'aime, which means I love you in French. And so I'm feeling like it probably is connected to love. There's probably a relationship in your life. And I did, the theme of a breakup came up at the beginning. It could be that there's a relationship that you've been holding on to that feels like it's really kind of like gasping its final breaths, but that you may be trying to prolong it because you're afraid of the pain of losing this relationship. And you would already know this. This is not new information. So if this comes as like a shock, or if this is like completely not resonating for you, then don't take it. This is only something that you would be kind of already aware of, that there's a relationship in your life that like really needs to end. And it may be that you and this other person, or however many people are involved, are clinging on to it because of the fear of what it would mean to actually call it quits. So this retrograde period will show you what you need to see. Remember the bit I said earlier about something being right in front of you, but you sort of like just completely missing it? It's that feeling. It's you suddenly seeing the truth about something that maybe has been evading you. Maybe it's something that you've been in denial about. Maybe it's seeing someone else clearly. Maybe it's seeing yourself clearly and needing to come to terms with maybe the parts of yourself that have been out of alignment. So that is the overall energy. I'm actually going to reshuffle these cards in so that we can dig deeper into the specific categories I mentioned. We're going to start with relationships, which is already up for us here. Then we will get into finances, and then we will get into pleasure, and then I'll pull the archetype card at the very end to give you sort of a focus energy for Venus retrograde. So let's start with relationships. What do my pile threes need to know about relationships during Venus retrograde? Relationships during Venus retrograde. All right. So we have the Four of Torches or the Four of Wands. We have the King of Cups in reverse. And we have the King of Torches or the King of Wands upright. So, Four of Wands is connected to a sense of home and belonging. For some of you, if you're going through a breakup, that could be challenging your home environment. Maybe this is a partner who you live with. For others of you, maybe your focus on relationships is connected to family or connected to the people that you literally live with. And those relationships are going to be really in focus throughout this retrograde period. When I rolled the astro dice, I was using I have this zodiac wheel wooden board, and I rolled the dice on that board. And all of the dice fell into houses 3, 4, and 5. And those houses are connected to our peers and our local environment, like our neighborhood, our actual home and our family and foundations, and then our expression and our pleasure. And so a lot of the things that we're talking about in this reading, and those themes, it could be siblings, family, it could be peers, it could be neighbors, it could be the people you live with, it could be the people you create with or the people you play with, whatever that means to you. And with the Four of Torches, though, that does bring us to the fourth house. That brings us to that sense of home and that sense of grounding. But the fourth house also connects to, the Four of Wands also connects to a sense of celebration. Usually there's some type of big milestone that occurs with the Four of Wands. Like we see often a wedding or some type of celebration in depictions of that card. So this one, though, is different than usual. It features this character who has their eyes closed, and it's hard to tell if they're laying down or standing up. I kind of get the sense that they're laying down, and it almost looks like they're laying on like flowery clouds. And so there's a dreaminess to this card. And so for you, you might be focused on bringing more magic into your home space. Maybe that means you're recovering from a breakup and kind of creating like a nook or a sanctuary for yourself in a new home, perhaps. Or you could be just focused on sort of attempting to bring a bit more harmony and a bit more equanimity into your home environment. The King of Cups in reverse and the King of Torches upright feel really connected, so I'm going to call them both in. For a lot of you, these are two people that you're dating. A King of Cups character in the reverse can be someone who is quite withholding, maybe even sometimes verging into emotionally manipulative, but someone who is really hard to read, who can be a little reckless with others' emotions, and sometimes someone, again, who does verge into the land of like being manipulative. And with the King of Cups specifically, we're looking at water signs, so they don't necessarily have to be a water sign, but they could be, which would be Pisces, typically connected with the King of Cups, or sure, it could be like Cancer and Scorpio. With the King of Torches, we're looking at fire signs, and specifically Sagittarius again, but could also be Leo and Aries. And so these could be two significant characters in your life, and that feels that way to me. It feels like perhaps one of these is you. Perhaps you're represented by the King of Torches or the King of Cups in reverse, and perhaps the other king is a partner of yours or just a significant person in your life. If that's the case, you can identify which one is you. I'm not going to do that for you. It might be different for different people listening. But I will say that the King of Torches upright is someone who's quite passionate and confident and has a bold sort of leadership quality to them. Someone who can stand tall and someone who kind of naturally falls into positions of authority. The King of Cups in reverse can be someone who can be a sort of like moody, manipulative artist type. Someone who is quite talented and has a lot to give, but maybe has a lot of healing that they need to do. And someone who can be reserved to the point of being inaccessible at times. And so I don't want to throw the M word around too much, but like, it's honestly one of the keywords for me that is often associated with this card. And so identifying the ways that you or another party could be manipulative, could be maybe just using coercive tactics in relationships, if that feels applicable to you. In less severe circumstances, it could be that there's someone who's just in either a depressive period or struggling with emotional regulation and asking a lot of you or of other people in their life and is just needing support. And that's true for anyone who is falling into habits of manipulative tendencies. It's gonna be because they have unhealed material, right? So being able to practice compassion with people and understand that we've all been manipulative at some point in our lives. So whether this is you or another person doesn't matter so much, except for the fact that you just need to get clear about what the dynamics in this relationship really are. If these are two different characters, both of which are actually in your life, and you don't identify with either of these characters, then it could be that these two relationships are in conflict and that you're needing to make some type of decision, or you're needing to get clear about what it is that you want for yourself. So if this isn't like a romantic relationship, it could be that these are two significant friends in your life, or even colleagues, or people who you just collaborate with and see on a daily basis. Maybe it's your roommates. Maybe it's people you live with, since that fourth house is coming up. Or people that you just like rub shoulders with a lot. Like it could even be classmates if that's relevant to you. But either way, it's feeling like you may be collaborating with these people in some way. It could be related to this creative vision that you have for your life that you're trying to like really kind of move forward. And it feels like you're needing more time to sort of like sort through what that vision looks like without having to rely so much on either of these characters. Because King of Torches can be someone who, with all of their sort of like power, can be a little overpowering. And King of Cups in reverse can kind of drag you down. And so that's not because either of these are bad people by any means. It's just that it's something to be aware of in dynamics. If you're noticing that you're experiencing challenges and maybe feeling emotionally drained, or maybe feeling a little bit insecure, is this relationship mirroring that back to you? Is that something that you need to work on within yourself, because that's unhealed material that's getting triggered when you associate with these other people? And so I want to stress that I don't share this stuff to villainize anyone, because again, we all have unhealed stuff and we all behave in ways that are more maladaptive. And it's more about identifying what types of behaviors are not okay to you and getting clear on what your needs are in relationships, so that you don't keep repeating the same cycles over and over again. Because I feel that these two characters might be like two types that you're constantly drawn toward. And King of Wands is wonderful. Like I love King of Wands energy, but it's not for everyone. And so maybe it's just a matter of preference. Like maybe you're just with someone and it's just not working, and you need to kind of understand that like the writing is on the wall, and that it's time to pull back your energy and maybe devote it to something that's more fulfilling, that's more aligned, that's more true to you. All right. So all of that is stuff that's probably going to come to some type of crescendo throughout Venus retrograde. And I get the sense that clarity is coming for you and that you will see what you need to see. So that's not something you need to be worried about or fearful about. It's just a matter of navigating it as best you can and taking the lessons and leaning on people you trust to support you if things get hard at any point. But I feel like you really have what it takes, and I get a sense of confidence from you. While you may fall into patterns of insecurity, as we all do, it doesn't feel like it's weighing so heavily on you that you feel like immobilized by it. It just feels like sort of a natural insecurity that arises when you're a little bit kind of out to sea or shaken up. I get a lot of fire energy from you. I'm like, woo, talking a lot faster than I usually do. I'm a Taurus, so I'm usually slow. Let's move on and get into finances for Venus retrograde. All right. All right. So we again have the Four of Wands, the Four of Torches. Interesting, repeat card here. So finances and relationships related to the home feel significant. There's something there. Ace of Pentacles and the Princess of Swords. So starting again with the Four of Torches, your finances are probably going into your home. I talked about kind of like building more of a sanctuary for yourself. So you might be doing redecorating throughout Venus retrograde and putting some money into that. I'm hearing like plants. I'm smelling like an oil diffuser. I'm feeling like, like there's sort of like a tropical vibe inside. So you may be creating a really like cool home space for yourself or a room space and needing to set aside money in order to do that. Money does, honestly, it feels good. It feels strong. Not like overflowing by any means, but it feels like there's an opportunity for you here with the Ace of Pentacles where you might be investing in something or putting your money into something new or getting a new work opportunity or a new opportunity for collaboration. I feel like a lot of you are artists or creatives in that way. And I'm feeling that with the Sag energy too. Like there's also maybe a performer energy. Maybe you're an artist who does some type of visual art or performance art. Or you may just be getting a type of offer for some type of project or collaboration or job or whatever throughout this Venus retrograde. It feels exciting. It feels like something that you're going to need to pause on to consider if it's aligned for you, if it's in line with your values. Because we do have the Princess of Swords, which can be a speedy energy that needs to sort of pause and check in with themselves and maybe get some advice. The Princess of Swords is the most youthful of the court cards of the sword suit. And we're talking about the mind. We're talking about being able to go through this developmental process of becoming wiser with the swords. And so with the Princess of Swords, we see someone in this deck kind of like charging ahead with this ferocity and confidence. But you might need to do a little bit of recon to kind of like assess your choices and do research and maybe get some advice before you commit to something. And that's not to say that whatever offer you receive or whatever opportunity comes across your desk is not good for you or right for you. It's just that you're being asked to sort it through, to chew on it, to spend a little bit of time assessing it to make sure it truly meets your needs and sort of checks the boxes. If possible, if this comes later on and you're able to hold off toward like the end of the retrograde cycle, which is technically Venus retrograde will be direct on September 3rd, 4th in some time zones. So if you're able to wait until later to kind of commit to anything, that's always a good idea. But it's not the end of the world if you have to start something new during a retrograde. People just get very doom and gloom about it. So trust your judgment and trust the judgment of wise people around you who can give you insight. You might want to get a tarot reading. You might want to get a personal reading to understand if whatever's in front of you is the best option for you. But it feels like your thought process on this is going to be quite clear and kind of like by the book, kind of like intellectual. So just do what feels right to you. I feel energized by it. I feel excited. I feel like you're excited about it. But I want to stress that if you're feeling like this is an impulsive decision, then please like come back to yourself and check in with yourself first, especially before signing a contract or committing to anything. You might want to ask for more money if it's a job offer. You might want to negotiate a higher salary or different terms that are more supportive and beneficial to you. So trust, take a pause, come back to this four of torches energy, come back to your home, because your home doesn't have to be a physical home. It can be the home within too. Come back to yourself, come back to spaces that reflect your essence, and do some contemplation and meditation in that energy to tap into what your yes feels like and what your no feels like. All right, let's get into pleasure. So this could be any type of pleasure, anything that makes you feel good. And that is not going to look the same for everyone. That might look very different for very different people. So whatever you find pleasurable is totally valid. It's pleasure for group 3. All right. So wow, we have the 4 of torches again. It's a big theme, and I'm spreading the cards out and intuitively picking them. I'm not even shuffling them like this like I often do, so it's meant to come out. All right, so first up, we'll end on the 4 of torches, but first up we have the 7 of pentacles in reverse. So this to me feels like a kind of a reminder that there's a commitment that you're letting go of. There's something you've assessed, you've identified the ways that you've invested in it for possibly a long time. Maybe 7 is significant, 7 months, 7 weeks on the low end, 7 years on the high end. And you identify that it's not working out, that you've given a lot of yourself to it, and that it needs to be cut short. And that can come with grief because we recognize that we've put a lot of ourselves into something. And so maybe this is like a business, maybe this is like an artistic practice, maybe this is a person. But we're recognizing that it's not bringing us pleasure anymore, and that means it's time to call it quits. So something that may have begun as fun and energizing and aligned might just be feeling like more of a slog. And so part of your experience with pleasure this Venus retrograde might be getting real with yourself about what is no longer bringing you pleasure, what needs to be tabled, what needs to be let go of, so that you can move forward and live more authentically. Next up, we have the Emperor in reverse. So this feels like this particular Emperor always reminds me of the devil. And the devil can have to do with pleasure. It can have to do with sometimes sort of taboo pleasure. It's related to Capricorn, but the Emperor is related to Aries. And so we have more fire energy here. The Emperor, and I should mention the 7 of Pentacles is related to Virgo. But the Emperor here feels like maybe they've shut down a part of themselves that used to feel quite fiery, that used to feel quite free and sort of self-embodied. And so that Aries comment that I made earlier about potentially Aries North Node, Libra South Node, if that's true for you, if you're within that little cohort that has that placement, then it could be for you that part of your pleasure work, this Venus retrograde, is turning that Emperor around and getting back in touch with what fires you up, getting back in touch with what you actually crave, what you desire. And that might be just a process of letting go of this 7 of Pentacles commitment that is not resonating for you anymore. Returning to your roots in a way, because I kind of see these trees in this upside down view kind of look like root systems. And so it's like getting in touch. We also have so much red on this card. It's getting in touch with your roots, getting in touch with maybe the root chakra, the root part of you that is connected to your sense of security. And from that place of security, asking yourself what you desire. And so now coming to the Four of Torches, which can be connected to home, it could be that once you find more security at home, since that feels true for many of you, that's when you're able to tap into your pleasure, because you need to feel safe first. You need to feel at home. You need to feel cozy. And that might be something that you kind of learn about yourself. Like maybe if we're actually talking about like sex, or like even like paired sex with a partner, partnered sex, it could be that you need to feel really comfortable. You need to feel like very safe in order for that to even feel pleasurable. And so that could be something, a theme that comes up for you. Alternatively, if that doesn't resonate, it could be that you're just like understanding that your home itself needs to feel a certain way in order for you to feel secure and in order for you to feel at ease in your home environment. You have like a particular way that you want things to look or that you want things to smell, and tapping into that and allowing those sensory desires to guide you is going to be a really important part of you kind of like growing and learning through this retrograde cycle. Okay, I have kind of some thoughts. I don't know, it's interesting. I'm having some friends, specifically like Sag friends, fly into my mind right now. So if any of my friends who are Sages are watching this, let me know. It would be fun. Okay, that is the last of those specific topics. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull your archetype card to get a sense for the archetype that you're going to be focusing on and rooting into this Venus retrograde. This can kind of act as like a North Star for you throughout this period. So your card is the Mentor. We talked about needing potentially an advisor of sorts or someone to seek guidance from throughout this period when it came to money stuff or like job or investment stuff. So that could be relevant to you. Sag energy, though, can often show up as a sort of teacher or a sort of guide and someone who possesses wisdom. And so this could be that you are in need of mentorship from someone. I do feel you have a youthful energy about you. So, you know, you're at this stage where you're potentially going through your Saturn return, and that's a time where it can be really, really valuable to find a mentor who can support you, to find someone who's beyond their Saturn return, who has more life experience, who can help to kind of guide you and reflect pieces of you back at you as you develop and as you mature. You could also yourself, if that doesn't resonate, you yourself could be moving into a role of mentorship. But either way, maybe both. Maybe you're seeking a mentor and also mentoring others. But that like knowledge sharing and wisdom sharing feels really important. And if it resonates for you, if Sag is big in your chart, then, and like the 12th house, you know, and I'm seeing North Node. So if that feels resonant and any of those things click, spend some time going inward, identify what it is that you're seeking, or get help in doing that. Maybe this is like finding a coach. Maybe this is finding someone who works in the field that you want to work in, or an elder who is a part of a lineage that you'd like to be a part of. Maybe it's becoming a sort of apprentice or enrolling in a course, or any of these things that sort of expand your horizons could be really big themes. I'm going to end by reading the guidebook to you, and at the end, I'll hold it up to the screen so that you can take a screenshot if you want to. And yeah, I had nothing to add there. Sometimes I just say words. Okay, so the mentor, the teacher, the sage, the guru. It is said that cosmic knowledge pours down on the world like a great illuminated waterfall. This can be an overwhelming force. The true teacher, though, is said to be able to hold this flow of wisdom at bay while the student sips from a focused stream. The mentor archetype has a gift for reading the room, for sensing the exact ingredient that will stimulate growth within the student, whether pleasant or painful. The mentor may appear aloof or available, harsh or tender, humorous or rigid. Their gift is to know what serves the soul. Ultimately, the mentor is in service of the greater cosmic good and aids in the elevation of consciousness. Anytime the mentor forgets this humble link and mistakes themselves for the source of enlightenment, the archetype falls into shadow. Keep in mind how easy it is to project power onto another. The expressions feet of clay and cult of personality exist for a reason, so you might want to look into those. Feet of clay and cult of personality. Although it's typically true that parents are our initial teachers, the child will eventually seek a mentor figure outside of the home to assist their growth. When light, this archetype is focused, clear, bright, and remains a student. When dark, it's self-serving, envious of youth, righteous, and rigid. To go deeper, you can read the riddles of Zen masters and their students. Fun. All right, y'all, if this was valuable to you, please do like this, comment if you want to share what's coming up for you and how it resonates, and please do follow if you're not already. I'm trying to build this channel and your support is really deeply appreciated. And if you know anyone else who might benefit from this, please do share. I will be back soon, and I hope that you have a really nourishing and powerful Venus retrograde season. It feels like you will. All right, take care.